On a Tuesday evening in late November, I opened my front door and found my daughter standing on the porch in the rain. She was holding Mia against her chest, my 5-year-old granddaughter, still wearing her school backpack, her little sneakers soaked through. Anna's eyes were the kind of empty I'd only seen once before, the night her mother passed. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there while the rain came down sideways off the roof. "Anna." That was all I said. She swallowed hard. "Dad." He changed the locks. I stepped back. "Get inside." She walked past me into the hallway, still holding Mia, who had her face pressed so tight against her mother's shoulder I couldn't see her eyes. I shut the door against the November cold and stood there for a second, just listening to the rain hit the gutters. My old house on Birchwood Lane had heard a lot of hard conversations over the years. Something told me tonight would be one of them. "Grandpa." Mia finally looked up at me. Her voice was so small it barely made it across the room. "Hey, there she is." I kept my voice steady. "You hungry?" She nodded once, slowly, the way kids do when they're trying very hard not to cry in front of adults. I got her settled on the couch with a blanket and a bowl of the chicken soup I'd had simmering since afternoon. Margaret used to say I cooked too much for one person. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd always known the door would need to be open someday. Anna stood in the middle of my kitchen in her wet coat, staring at the floor. I handed her a mug of coffee. She took it but didn't drink. "Tell me what happened," I said. "From the beginning." She looked up. "All of it?" "All of it." She sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd done her homework every night for 12 years, and she started talking. Ryan Calloway had moved into Anna's apartment 18 months earlier, about a year after she'd bought it. She'd met him through a coworker, and at the time he seemed like the kind of man who had things figured out. Steady job in logistics, good manners, remembered her birthday. He was patient with Mia in a way that surprised her back then. What Anna hadn't known, what none of us knew, was that the man she trusted with her home was running a version of himself for each person in his life. Patient and devoted to Anna. Charming and available to someone else entirely. "He told me he was getting a promotion," she said, wrapping both hands around the mug. "He said we needed to put both our names on the car loan to get the better rate. He made it sound like it was for us." "When was this?" "About 4 months ago." She looked at the table. "I signed the paperwork at the kitchen counter. He had it all printed out. I didn't read every line." She stopped. "I know. What else did he have you sign?" She exhaled. "That's what I don't know." I didn't ask anything else right then. I just let her talk. She'd started noticing things in October. Money from their shared account disappearing in amounts small enough to ignore once, twice, then impossible to ignore the third time. Ryan always had an explanation. A car repair. A security deposit on a storage unit. A gift for his mother. Then last week, a woman had called Anna's cell phone by mistake, looking for Ryan, and when Anna had said she was his girlfriend, there was a long pause on the other end before the woman said quietly, "I think we need to talk." Her name was Serena. She lived in Knoxville. She and Ryan had been together for 2 years. Anna found out on a Thursday. By Sunday, Ryan had made his decision. He told Anna it wasn't working out, packed a bag, and left. He was back Monday morning while Anna was at work, and by the time Anna got home that evening with Mia from aftercare, the key she'd had since the day she moved in no longer fit the lock. He had changed it without a single word. Her clothes were in 2 trash bags by the mailbox. "He left Mia's backpack at least," Anna said. She laughed once, a hollow sound. "I guess that was generous." I closed my eyes for just a second. Margaret's voice moved through my head the way it always does when I'm standing at the edge of doing something I'll regret. "Frank, anger is a fire that only burns the person holding it." I stood up and went to the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Mia had fallen asleep on the couch, the soup bowl balanced on the cushion beside her. "Go to sleep," I told Anna. "Both of you." "Guest room's made up." "Dad, I don't want to." "Anna." I turned around. "This isn't a burden. This is what the room is for." She nodded, and something in her shoulders gave way just slightly, not relief. Just the first moment she'd let herself stop holding everything up at once. I stayed up until well past midnight, sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee that went cold. Not out of rage, out of focus. Ryan had acted like a man who believed he'd already covered his tracks. In my experience, when a man is that confident, he's either very smart or very reckless, and most reckless men mistake one for the other. Monday morning, I made 2 phone calls before 8 o'clock. The first was to my former colleague, Ray Hutchins. Ray had spent 30 years as a title officer at Cumberland County Records before he retired, and he had the kind of memory for paperwork that made attorneys nervous. We'd stayed in touch the way men do after they've worked alongside each other through long, complicated projects, occasional coffee, the odd phone call when one of us needed to think something through out loud. He answered on the third ring. Frank Mercer, haven't heard from you since the 4th. I need a favor, Ray. It's about my daughter. Silence on his end. Then, come by the house. 9 o'clock. I drove through a quiet neighborhood of brick colonials with their bare November trees and found Ray already at the kitchen table with his reading glasses on and a yellow legal pad in front of him. I told him everything Anna had told me. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the table. The car loan. You said she signed jointly? That's what she said. With whose money was the car purchased originally? Hers. Ray tapped the table once with the eraser end of his pencil. Did she get copies of what she signed? She said Ryan handled the filing. He was quiet for a moment. Frank, there are a few things I can check. But you need to get her copies of every document that has her name on it, every single one. Don't wait. What are you thinking? He looked at me carefully. I'm thinking your daughter may have signed things she didn't fully understand. And I'm thinking that was not an accident. He asked for Ryan's full name and the address of Anna's apartment complex. He said he'd make a few calls and be in touch by end of day. On the drive home, I called Anna. She was at work. She'd gone in because she said sitting still made it worse. I told her not to sign anything Ryan sent her, not to respond to any messages about finances, and to gather whatever documents she could access through her email or online accounts. She was quiet for a moment. Dad, what did you find? Nothing yet, but the way he behaved too comfortable, too fast. Someone who acts that sure doesn't act that way unless he thinks the ground is already solid under him. She paused. Or, unless he's made it that way. Exactly. That afternoon, Ray called back. His voice was measured, but I could hear something beneath it. Frank, sit down. I'm driving. Pull over. I pulled into a strip mall parking lot and cut the engine. Ray told me that in addition to the joint car loan, Anna's name appeared on a secondary credit line opened 6 months ago against her lease terms, with Ryan listed as co-applicant. There was also a record of a dispute filed with the county, a claim on furniture and household items by a third party, which appeared to have been filed the same week Ryan changed the locks. He didn't just leave, Ray said. He positioned himself first. The silence in that car felt very loud. Ray, I said carefully, if the signatures on some of these documents turn out to be inconsistent with what Anna actually signed, then you're not looking at a breakup, he said. You're looking at fraud. I sat there for a minute with my hand resting on the steering wheel, watching a woman push a shopping cart across the lot. A couple of pigeons picked at something near a dumpster. The ordinary world kept moving. I drove home and started organizing everything by date. The following morning, Anna and I sat down with Patricia Brennan, a family law and consumer protection attorney whose office was in a converted Victorian house on Elm Street downtown. She had short silver hair and the kind of composure that didn't come from being untouched by hard things. It came from having walked through them enough times to know the footing. She listened without a notepad for the first 15 minutes. Then she reached for one. Miss Mercer, she began. Anna's fine. Anna. She nodded. I want you to be very honest with me. Is there anything you signed in the past year that you didn't fully read? Anna looked at her hands. The car loan paperwork. And Ryan brought home what he said were insurance documents about 6 months ago. He said they were routine. I signed where he told me to. Patricia became very still. Do you remember what they looked like? There were 3 or 4 pages. He had them folded open to the signature lines. Patricia made a careful note. Anna, I want you to pull your credit report today. All 3 bureaus. Tonight if possible. She looked at me. Mr. Mercer, your friend at County Records, can he be available to speak with my paralegal? I'll ask him. Good. She folded her hands. Here's what I can tell you so far. If there are documents bearing Anna's signature that she didn't knowingly execute, that is potentially criminal, not just a civil matter. The car is one issue. The credit line is another. Depending on what else we find, this could involve the DA's office. Anna looked up. You mean he could be arrested? Patricia answered evenly. I mean, the truth tends to expand once you start pulling the right threads. Let's find out what's there before we decide what to call it. Thanksgiving arrived the way it always does suddenly, before you feel ready for it. I tried to make the house feel normal. I made Margaret's cornbread stuffing from the index card she'd written it on 30 years ago. The handwriting faded to a soft blue now. Anna helped with the pie crust. Mia sat at the kitchen counter on a stool and informed us both very seriously that she needed to be in charge of the cranberry sauce, which meant she mostly stirred it and tasted it with a spoon every 45 seconds. "Grandpa," she said at one point, looking up at me with those big dark eyes. "Yeah, baby. Is our apartment going to get fixed?" Anna turned toward the stove and didn't say anything. I crouched down beside the counter so I was at Mia's level. "We're working on it. You don't have to worry about that part." "Okay." She went back to the cranberry sauce. "I like it here better anyway. You have a yard." I stood up and caught Anna looking at me from across the kitchen. She had tears in her eyes she was trying not to show. I gave her a small nod, and she turned back to the stove. Later that evening, after Mia was asleep, Anna's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. "What is it?" She handed me the phone. It was a text from Ryan. "You're making this harder than it has to be. The car's in both our names. You don't want a legal fight. Just let me buy out your half and we move on." Then, a minute later, "I have a lawyer. You don't want this to go further than it needs to." I handed the phone back without a word. "He sounds confident," Anna said. "Yes, he does." "That's bad, right?" I thought about what Patricia had said. I thought about what Ray had found. It means he thinks he's already won. People who've actually already won don't usually feel the need to remind you. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she set the phone face down on the table. "I keep thinking I should have known," she said quietly. "You trusted someone you were building a life with. That's not stupidity. That's what people who love each other are supposed to do." She was quiet. "The mistake was his, Anna, not yours." She nodded slowly, but I could tell she hadn't quite let herself believe it yet. That's the part that takes longest. The legal case moves faster than the healing always. The weeks that followed were the kind that television never shows you. No dramatic confrontations. No single moment where everything clicked into place. Just early mornings and late evenings, and a kitchen table covered in printed bank statements and credit reports and document copies that Patricia's office had subpoenaed. Some days it felt like progress. Some days it felt like standing in the same spot while the water rose. Anna was holding herself together better than I would have in her position. She went to work every day. She took Mia to school. She met with Patricia every Thursday afternoon, but I'd catch her sometimes, standing at the window in the guest room after she thought I was in bed, just staring out at the yard. One night I knocked on the doorframe. "Can't sleep either?" I said. She shook her head. "I keep running through every conversation we had, looking for the signs. You'll find some." Looking back is easy. I should have noticed the account withdrawals sooner. I walked in and leaned against the wall. "Anna, there's something I've learned in 62 years that took me too long to understand." I paused. Blaming yourself for being deceived is the second thing a deceiver does to you. The first thing is the deception itself. She looked at me. "That's a hard way to say it. It's a true way." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom would have said it gentler. Your mother would have said it over pie, which is why everyone liked her better." Anna smiled. It was the first real one I'd seen in 2 weeks. December moved slow. Patricia called one Thursday afternoon and asked if I could come in. Her office smelled like strong coffee and old books. She and her paralegal, a young man named Carter, were already at the conference table when I arrived. A manila folder was open in front of her. "The handwriting analysis came back," Patricia said. She turned 2 documents toward me. One was the insurance paperwork Anna had signed. The other was a financing application for a personal loan taken out the previous spring. The signatures on these 2 documents are inconsistent with Anna's known signature samples. I looked at them for a long moment. Side by side, even I could see it something slightly off in the loops, the pressure, the angle. "Meaning, someone signed her name," I said. "The examiner's conclusion is that they were not written by the same person who signed the car loan application, which we know Anna did sign." Patricia folded her hands. "That's not a civil matter, Frank. That's forgery." The room felt smaller. "There's more." Carter slid another document across the table. "The personal loan. It was taken out in Anna's name, but the disbursement went to an account we can't find any record of Anna opening. Where did the money go? Carter exchanged a look with Patricia. Best we can trace right now, to Knoxville, Tennessee. Serena, the woman who had called by accident and set all of this in motion. The one who had called to say she thought they needed to talk. Patricia spoke carefully. We reached out to the woman in Knoxville. Her attorney contacted us yesterday. She is prepared to cooperate. It appears she was also deceived. She believed Ryan was single. She found transfers to her account she says she knew nothing about, and she has reason to believe he was using her address to receive financial correspondence. I sat back in my chair. He built the whole thing in layers. Yes, Patricia said. Each person knew only their part, until one phone call. Until one phone call, she agreed. I drove home in the gray December light, thinking about the kind of calculation it takes to live like that. The constant management of separate truths, the energy it must require. And then I thought about Ryan standing in Anna's apartment with a locksmith, confident, certain he'd wrapped everything up before anyone could follow the thread. He'd forgotten that threads are pulled from both ends. That evening, I told Anna everything. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, where she'd done her homework for 12 years, and I laid out every piece of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stared at the table for a long time. He forged my signature, she said at last. That's what the examiner believes. He took money in my name and sent it to her. Yes. She looked up at me. And she didn't know? That's what her attorney is saying. And from what we can tell, it tracks. Anna was quiet again. I could see her working through it, the same way I had in the car, the sheer constructed architecture of the thing. She called me, Anna said slowly. She could have just hung up. She could have. That one call changed everything, I said. Yes. Mia appeared in the doorway in her pajamas holding a stuffed bear. Mama, I can't sleep. First, Anna looked over at her. Something in her face softened completely. Come here, baby. She held her arms out, and Mia crossed the room and climbed into her lap without any of the awkwardness of a 5-year-old, just that complete, unself-conscious trust that only exists between a child and her mother. I stood up quietly and started washing the dinner dishes. The warrant came through on a Wednesday in mid-December. Patricia called me first, and I sat down at the kitchen table the way she'd asked, even though I was already sitting. She told me the charges: fraud, forgery, unlawful use of personal financial information. The DA had reviewed everything: the handwriting analysis, the bank records, Carter's trace on the loan disbursements, the cooperation from Serena's attorney, and found it sufficient. That evening, Anna's phone rang. I was in the next room and heard her voice change. What? Applause. When? She appeared in the doorway a minute later. Her face was complicated: relief, disbelief, something that hadn't made up its mind yet. They arrested him, she said. This afternoon. His sister called to tell me. I nodded. His sister seemed to think I'd feel bad. Do you? She thought about that honestly. I feel like I can breathe. We stood there for a moment. Outside, the first real snow of the season had started. Just light flakes drifting past the porch light, nothing dramatic. The kind that mostly melts by morning but makes everything quiet while it falls. I want to call Patricia, Anna said. Go ahead. I'll check on Mia. Mia was already asleep, the bear tucked under one arm. I stood in the doorway of the guest room for a minute, just watching her breathe. A 5-year-old should sleep exactly like that, completely at ease, completely safe, not a single worry capable of reaching her. She deserved every bit of that. The months that followed were not simple. They rarely are. The criminal case and the civil recovery process moved on separate tracks, and Patricia was right when she'd warned us early that real justice runs on paperwork and patience, not dramatic speeches. There were delays. There were mornings Anna came to breakfast looking like she hadn't slept and didn't want to talk about it, and I let her have those mornings without asking. She started seeing a counselor in January. She told me about it one evening while we were washing up after dinner. She asked me what I was most afraid of, Anna said, handing me a pot to dry. What did you say? That I'd stop trusting my own judgment. She paused. That this would make me the kind of person who sees the worst in everyone before giving them a chance. And what did she say? That awareness of the wound is half the work of healing it. She looked at the window above the sink. I don't know if I believe that yet, but I'm trying. That's more than enough, I said. By March, between the recovered assets, the court's rulings on the fraudulent loan, and what was confirmed to have been taken illegally, Anna received back what she was owed, not immediately, not cleanly, but eventually and in full. It took forms and hearings and 2 more Thursday afternoons in Patricia's office. But the number that finally appeared in Anna's account was hers, and every dollar of it was legitimate. She used part of it to lease a small house about 12 minutes from mine. Good neighborhood, yard with a fence. Mia picked out the paint color for her bedroom without hesitation: yellow, the exact yellow of a school bus, which Anna negotiated down to a slightly more reasonable shade through careful diplomacy. Anna went back to full-time work that spring. She'd been a pediatric occupational therapist for 8 years, the kind of job that asks everything from you and somehow also gives it back. Her patients' parents sent her cards sometimes. She kept them in a box in her closet. Mia started kindergarten in September. The night before the first day, she laid out her backpack and her outfit and her lunchbox in a very precise arrangement on the floor of her room, and then stood back to inspect it the way a general inspects the troops. "Grandpa," she called out, because I'd come over to help with the backpack buckle that had been sticking. "Right here. Do you think my teacher will like me?" I crouched down beside the arrangement on the floor and looked at it very seriously, like we were both evaluating something that required professional assessment. "I think your teacher is going to have to work very hard to be the most interesting person in that classroom," I said. "She's going to have competition." Mia looked up at me. Then she grinned so wide I could see the gap where she'd lost a tooth the week before. That evening, sitting on my porch while the September air came in cool and easy off the street, I thought about the man who had stood in my daughter's apartment with a locksmith and believed the story ended there. He'd built his whole plan on the idea that Anna had no one watching out for her, that she was alone, that her signature on a piece of paper was just a detail, and details don't talk back. He forgot that details have fathers. Not long after, on a Saturday afternoon in early October, I was cleaning the gutters when a car I didn't recognize turned slowly into my street and parked 2 houses down. I kept working. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the driveway below. I looked down. It was Ryan. He was alone. He looked thinner and somehow younger, the way people do when the version of themselves they'd been performing collapses. He was in jeans and a plain jacket, and he stood on my driveway with his hands in his pockets like a man who'd thought through exactly what he wanted to say and then had it leave him the moment he arrived. I climbed down from the ladder and set the gloves on the porch rail. "Ryan." "Mr. Mercer." He looked at the ground first, then up at me. "I'm not here for anything. He stopped. "I don't even know if this helps anything." "Say what you came to say." He nodded. I convinced myself it wasn't that bad. Each piece on its own seemed like— He shook his head. "It doesn't matter how I got there. I got there, and what I did to Anna and to Mia." He stopped again. I waited. There's nothing to fill that kind of silence with. "I heard she's doing well," he said. "She is. I'm glad." He said it simply, without performance, and I believed him. "Ryan," I said, "what you had with my daughter was real enough that she trusted you. That's not a small thing to throw away." He looked at me. "You don't get to ask for forgiveness. That's not how it works. But if there's anything left of the man Anna thought she knew, the one who was good to Mia in the beginning," I paused, "that man still has choices to make. Every day he has choices." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know." He held out his hand. I looked at it. Months ago, I wouldn't have taken it. Now I did not because the wound was healed, but because I'd lived long enough to know that holding on to what he'd done would cost me more than it would ever cost him. He walked back to his car and drove away, and I stood in the driveway until he turned the corner. The back door opened. Anna was inside, and she stepped out onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. "Was that Ryan?" "Yes." She came down the steps and handed me one of the mugs. We stood together in the October afternoon, watching the leaves come off the maple at the end of the yard. "What did he want?" "I think he wanted to apologize," I said. "He didn't know how." She was quiet for a moment. "Did it help, him coming?" I thought about that honestly. "Not in any way I can easily explain. But yes, a little." She looked at the empty street. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder briefly, the way she'd done when she was 12 years old and something had hurt her and she didn't have words for it yet. We drank our coffee in the quiet. By the holidays, the guest room had gone back to being what it was built for, a room where the people I love sleep when they want to be close. Mia slept there on Friday nights, which she called grandpa sleepovers, and treated as a formal event requiring her bear, her blanket, and a very specific pillow arrangement. On a Friday in December, she came in from Anna's car wearing her little knit hat and her backpack, marched straight to the living room, and informed me that she had learned something very important at school that day. "What's that?" I said. "That a snickerdoodle," she said, very precisely, "is not the same as a snicker." I laughed so hard my coffee nearly went everywhere. "Who told you that?" "My teacher." She put her hands on her hips. She was wrong, though. Yours are better than candy. That evening, after she was asleep, I stood at the kitchen window with the last of my coffee and looked out at the yard. The garden was done for the season, brown and bare now. But in the spring, there would be tomatoes along the fence and sunflowers against the garage wall, the ones Mia had planted in September that would come back taller than she was. Margaret used to say that the best thing a father can do is make sure his children know they have a place to come back to. Not because they'll need it, just so they always know the door is open. I'd never understood what she meant until that Tuesday in November, when the rain was coming sideways off the roof and my daughter was standing on the porch holding her little girl. I understood it now. If you've ever had to stand between your family and someone who tried to take everything from them, you know there's nothing noble about it. You don't feel like a hero. You feel like a father, and that's exactly what you're supposed to feel. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope the people you love always know where the door is. When someone we love shows up at our door in the rain with nowhere left to go, we don't think about inconvenience, we just step aside and let them in. That instinct, that open door, is the truest thing a family can offer each other. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to make sure the people you love know the light is on and the coffee's warm. A small note for you, this story was created and fictionalized by AI, offered as a little entertainment, and a reminder that even in the hardest seasons, the people who love us are always worth coming home to.